Welcome to the Huffing Spirit Podcast, where we take you from the sacred to the profane, from the serious to the silly, from the outer to the inner, and from the guru back to you. Join your playful podcast guides, Alex Hindley and Natalie Dick, as they bring you back to a grounded and more authentic approach to spirituality.
Fucking live.
We are actually live physically in the same room.
Exciting.
Super exciting. We've never done this, and Alex and I have not seen each other for 4 years.
Yeah.
So this
is crazy.
I know, it's kind of like a fun little reunion, and
I'm not used to making this much eye contact.
I know, it's weird. I'm used to seeing you on a screen.
Yeah. I can kind of like look off or like look at my phone or something.
Right. So
Welcome to the Huffing Spirit Podcast.
Yeah, we're diving in live, and this is episode number...
No numbers.
No numbers,
because we never know how we edit stuff.
I was going to say this is episode on wounds.
Oh, I thought you were going to say this is episode number...
I might have been going there.
Okay.
I might have been going there, and then I circled back.
Okay.
Yes.
Excellent.
So,
this is the wounding episode.
This is the wounded episode. So we're going to dive deep into wounds today and kind of go in all sorts of different directions.
Yeah, I mean, as wounds do typically go.
Yes.
Right? We were talking about it before we started recording. It's kind of like an octopus. So the what of it is, you said it wonderfully. It's trauma that is an unfinished experience, sometimes within the body, or we could just say like in your being.
Yeah, in the body, which is in the emotional body, the mental body, the spiritual body, whatever. Wounds are, unfinished experiences that basically get stuck in your field and become blockages. And then it makes us redirect our energy in an inauthentic way.
Way to bring that to an earlier episode.
Yeah, the energy of authenticity. So our wounds can really misdirect us, but can also be very purposeful.
Yeah, purposeful in the way, if I could steal from the person who shall not be named for the millionth time. The wound is the radar for healing and for finding others that are wounded.
Yeah.
So I've been told that, you use your wounds, and somebody once told me that my core wound is embarrassment. So I don't want to see others embarrassed because I know what that's like to be embarrassed at a very deep rooted level. So you use that as a radar of looking out for people, but also protecting them in a way.
Yeah. And I remember when I learned about when Kurt,
you named him.
I named him, when Kurt would tell me, your wounds are the radar for others. I remember when I heard that for the first time, I was like, oh my God, that's so true. Because in my business, I've evolved, and the niche, the type of women that I've helped has changed. And it's all been because I've changed. It's like I'm addressing different wounds within myself and all these cumulative experiences. I initially started helping women with hormonal issues when I was working more in the physical. And that's because I had recovered from hormonal issues. And then I moved over to emotional trauma. That's because I was literally moving through my emotional trauma, worked through it. And now it's the wound that literally vibrationally calls in the same women who have the same issues that they haven't previously healed. Make sense?
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So the why.
Mm-hmm.
We're both in agreement that we all have wounds. I think we need to understand if we're reacting from these wounds or we're using them to be more empathetic with others. So sometimes people can get triggered, and that's coming from, let's call it an abandonment wound or something like that. And they feel that people are going to be leaving them, and they react in a really nasty way that actually ends up pushing more people away.
Yeah.
How do we meet that person with kind of compassion and empathy and understanding that hurt people, and we all have wounds.
Yeah. I think, when we look at wounding, I love the physical wounding metaphor. It's like when you have, say you blow your knee out, right? Like I tore my ACL, right? And
hypothetically or really?
No, I really did. I tore my ACL playing soccer, and super painful, but it's not something that you can ignore. It's like it's so funny how we're so material driven, like so physically driven, that if we have an ACL tear, it's like we have to get surgery. We have to like allow it to heal and mend, and we give it space and time. I mean, most people do. Some people do dumb things and like keep continuing on playing soccer when they've got like a wound. But
well, I also think you could argue that like sometimes we're not paying attention to it.
Yeah.
You know, to take care of it
Same
before
thing.
it gets to that point.
But we'll give energy to tending to the wounds of our physicality, but most often people can't look at their emotional wounds. It's like, I can't go there, and they just keep distracting and distracting and distracting. So
disengaging, stonewalling.
Yeah, bypassing, all of that stuff. So I think that, you know, in this episode, really looking at wounds are there. There's so much information in the wound for you to kind of get. And sometimes when we get wounded, there's a reason why we're meant to sit still, or there's a reason why we're called into that next layer of emotional wounding or whatever it is. I think it's really important that people tend to their wounds emotionally, mentally, physically, because if we don't, it starts to redirect us in unconscious ways. So if you think about, you can't walk from blowing your knee out with an ACL, like tear, you can't walk straight, right? Like you can't continue on in life as you normally would. Like your gait is all screwed up.
You're going to be out of equilibrium.
Yeah, you're going to be out of equilibrium. You get pulled off to the side to tend to the wounding. But if your emotional wounds don't get tended to, you're literally off course of your authenticity because you're having to navigate a blockage. The wound becomes the blockage and you're redirecting and going around in a different direction than you should be.
So can you heal if you don't identify or heal that wound? Like, is that a thing?
No. I mean, okay, so here's the other thing. I think that some wounds aren't meant to be healed. I think there's like a divine timing of when you kind of open those wounds. There are people that, you know, the universe will synchronistically place people in your reality to activate a certain wound within you to allow you to unfold, right?
That could be a very charged idea you're throwing out, but I get it. I'm with it.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I was telling Natalie earlier today, I was having a moment with my son, and my wife's like, well, maybe this is a good time for you to start like doing all that stuff that you tell everybody about. Wasn't the opportune time that I wanted to hear that, but yeah, it is. It's just another reflection point of how do we lean in and use that. And I think the true masters are really like, you're pulling from everything. Everything's all around you, and you're using it, and you're alchemizing it for your own growth at all times. It can be beautiful and stressful and chaotic all at the same time.
Yeah. And that's when I say like the universe is like everything is synchronized to bring in like the opening of certain wounds or kind of like the next layer of it. So do you want to get into different types of wounds? Because I think there's like, what I'm talking about is layers of a wound.
I mean, let's get into it. I will go to I'm going to default to you on some of this stuff.
Okay.
So I think if as I've been told, if you're in the healing space, if you're out of your depth, refer to somebody else. So I might be referring to you more on this and just trying to practice active listening. But how do we get them? How might we find them or spot them within ourselves or others eventually?
Well, I think it begins with discomfort. I think our wounds bring up like a lot of what, even physically or emotionally, we start to feel things that are really uncomfortable. And that can be, you know, whether it's anxiety, whether it is, bouts of depression, there's a bit of a numbing there. And our wounds are trying to get our attention for deeper things that are going on.
Yeah, and if you're paying attention to it, it could be gold. It could be very transformative.
Yeah, super transformative. But again, if if you don't have the capacity to look within yourself or to tend to look at that discomfort, because we have a world where we're chasing like peak experiences and we just want like happiness and excitement and bliss.
Dopamine, instant distraction.
Yeah. So we tend to rev in these like peak experiences and like life is amazing and all I want is happiness. We don't, if we're on that path, our wounds over here are going to be completely ignored. And there's
like a festering that's going to happen.
Yeah, it festers. And just think of like the physical wound. If you don't tend to the physical wound, it's going to get infected. It's going to like, literally you're going to need antibiotics if you don't like tend to the wound immediately if it's that bad. Right. So I love that metaphor of going back to the physical because again, we're so
physically oriented.
Yeah, we're so physically oriented that we're always like tending to that, but like we're so disembodied. You know what I mean? Like our world, everyone's like, oh, I just want to do this over here, and they want to bypass.
Well, and I hear you say this a lot, and I've been hearing a lot of other people say it too, like the top up, we're feeling from the neck up. When you really get into the body work is that feminine aspect of allowing yourself to feel the discomfort within the body. Sometimes you don't even have to mentally understand what's going on or what happened. It's just like that unfinished experience, allowing the energy to move through yourself and not holding on to it, not analyzing it and trying to process it. So like some of the stuff we were doing before, we did some bioenergetic exercises to open the armoring up within the body.
So Alex took me through, we were about to hit record and I'm like, I just traveled here. I like woke up at 4 a.m. And I said to Alex, I'm like, let's like do some body movements to like re-energize. So he just took me through this bioenergetics. Do you want to explain a little bit about bioenergetics?
I'm very much a new student to this, although like we learned some of this in class. Mm-hmm. This is a derivative of Reich. Reich was a disciple of Freud.
Right.
And he found that there's like armoring within the body. And there's these different personality patterns. I refer anybody to Stephen Kessler's 5 personality patterns. Mm-hmm. There's these ways that your body's going to armor, and that's from pre-birth to 6 months or 6 years, based off of the initial wounding that happens. Some people are wounded on a spiritual level because like their parents didn't want them before they got here. So that was energetically, spiritually felt that like they weren't wanted, and then they were coming into this environment where they weren't wanted. Mm. So that wound for them starts before their timeline.
It's a core wound.
Yeah. Yeah, so you armor your body armors and holds on to these things, and your body essentially says, hey, mentally, you don't have the time to figure this stuff out.
Yeah.
I got you. I'll hold on to it. So as you were saying before, trauma is unfinished experience within the body.
Yeah.
You hold on to that. And the way that you armor ends up determining the way that you release and can pull energy into your body. Mm. And holistically speaking, we're not healing because of an imbalance. True health is equilibrium of positive, negative energies.
Yeah.
Yin yang perfectly balanced throughout us. Your chakras look great.
Yeah.
So that's ideal. And then there's these exercises. So there's Stephen Kessler's work, and this is to a lot of the awesome dudes I've been meeting here. There's Stephen Kessler's work, which goes off of Reich's work, off of Lowen and somebody else's, Baracus's work as well. Mm-hmm. So goes off of that work, and then the bioenergetics are the physical exercises you do to open your body up. So it's like the peanut butter to the jelly, as a friend says.
I love that.
So you have the armoring, and then you do these exercises to open your body up to be able to feel more. And doing these exercises for months now, I've been noticing just subtle shifts in energy that I'm able to recognize, and especially as you get into like the deeper levels of healing, as Natalie can attest to, it is all subtle. It's not like a gross thing. So that might be why Aikido is so cool to me, because there's a lot of subtle stuff going on that you're not aware of. So you're always tuning your body to feel like what's going on within this other person's body, as opposed to the gross force of a punch that you might be feeling.
And I love that analogy that the armoring, like the body is literally trying to get your attention to like the deeper part that you're not going to get to. Like you're ignoring it. And then that wound eventually filters out like from the energy, from the emotional, from the mental, and it starts to create these like almost like your mental schemas or emotional patterns start to show up in your physical body, and they start to show you like where your tension is. Like, I think that's like absolutely fascinating. Like, our body is so intelligent that most of the planets, like, they're walking around and they're just like neck up thinking about stuff. I'm like, there's so much information in your body. You have to go into the body and feel it and like start to understand its language.
And it doesn't speak a conscious language.
No, it doesn't speak English. It like literally is the feminine. It's literally chaotic and all over the place. But so anyway, back to your bioenergetic exercise that we did, it helped to kind of open up. Like, I was feeling tired, and Alex and I haven't seen each other for like 4 years, and we're like, oh my God, we're doing this podcast in person. Let's like get our energy.
We should totally eat snacks for 45 minutes.
Yeah, we did do that. We were like,
and get on a microphone.
Yeah, and then crash. So anyway, and I was telling him downstairs when we were doing this exercise is like my version of bioenergetics, or how I move my body so much more intuitively. It's less structured. So I'll do like dances, but I've really attuned to listening to what my body wants. And it's almost like I turn off my mind. I let my mind and my thoughts go, and I just let my body move in a way that it feels good. And that for me has been so healing, because sometimes I get to these real tension parts in my body. Like, there's tension, and then I feel like a really big emotion coming up, and I'll release it. I'll allow that layer of that wounding, whether it's a core wound, whether it's, just a little like small trauma, I'll allow it to move through me and express itself or myself. And it's like, oh, there we go. I'm not blocked. And boom, my energy comes back online. It's like, if people just knew body work, it's just so fascinating to me.
It's truly fascinating. When you hear from like the top down approach of like you're talking to a therapist and you're cognitively working out your issues or whatever you think it is, you're using your mind for that. That's a top down thing, and it has tremendous validity. If the bottom approach is just a complementary aspect to that is going to further round out your healing experience. You have the top down talking through with somebody, group work that engages you, socializing, and then you have this physical aspect of using your body and allowing it to go up and through, and you're not analyzing it. You're not shaming yourself for the way that you move.
I love it because body work takes me out of my head, completely takes me out of the story and the narrative. And yes, you do top-down approaches. You need both to meet kind of like heart-centered space. But getting to our wounds, oftentimes we think that it requires like journaling and like deep reflection, but which it can and it does sometimes. But a lot of the times for me, and kind of what I guide clients through, is like, let's move through the body and see how the body wants to tell its story.
So how do you gauge whether somebody has a certain wound? Like, do they know themselves, or are you able to pick up on that as their guide and practitioner?
So I can pick up on that, but it's never real. Like, I don't go in and say this happened to you and like project. Mine's more of a collaborative approach. Like, I want them to discover their own wounding through a series of questioning, but I'm always paying attention to, I guess, that the energy of and vibration of their voice. Like, I can feel it, and it prompts me to ask certain questions, and then that question lands with that person, and then it opens them up to the next layer where we need to go.
Well, Natalie did an amazing meditation for the planet the other day. And one of the cool things that I took away from that was you said, I want you to listen with all of your senses. And I immediately was like, the fuck are you talking about?
Like, how do I listen with my nose?
Yeah, how do I listen then with my...
Or experience all of your senses.
Yeah, and then you walked us through that. Like, you were like, taste what's going on in your mouth. What is still there, or what was present before, hearing. And then, like, you engaged all of the senses. And then you called forth all of us to use all of our senses as a full body listening. And I thought, well, full sensory listening.
Yeah, full sensory experiencing, I guess.
And I love that because I don't hear enough people talking about it, but it does encompass us to activating. And sometimes it's almost just telling yourself on a conscious level, like, okay, activate this sector of the body that we don't normally use.
Mm-hmm.
It was really profound.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So that wound, that the body has the information, but the wound does as well too.
The wound is so, and here's the thing, like, I think that people are so afraid to go into their body and feel wounding. And there's a big reason why a lot of people can't, because their nervous system is so dysregulated that their nervous system is trying to keep them alive, basically in survival mode. And they actually can't go down and feel because they're revving so much in fight or flight.
So to go into the memory would actually activate their survival mechanism even more so.
Even more. Or they're revving in such high survival mechanism already that they've got so many backlog of emotions, so many wounds that have never been tended to, and their nervous system actually won't let them go down and feel. So
you're talking polyvagal theory?
Yeah, polyvagal. So they're not able to actually access their wounds in a safe way because it's like re-traumatizing. So this is where, if you are heavily dysregulated and you have a lot of trauma, working with a professional, don't just dive into your wounds by yourself and be like, okay, I'm going to feel everything, because sometimes you can get into the body and there's so much backlog that it's way too overwhelming and you're almost re-traumatizing yourself.
Flooding, almost.
Yeah, flooding, and just you're going to re-experience those traumas. So body work is really powerful, but when there's a way and acclimating your nervous system to kind of bring you down into the body in just small doses of safety so that you can kind of get to the next layer.
So I love what you're saying, because the small levels of safety
is huge when you're getting down into the body with wounding. True,
and it's true on all these other dimensions too. And I've heard some people say that there's a lot of people in the plant medicine community that are like, oh, you need to do a journey. You need to do this. It's so...
God, no.
Yeah, I would recommend everybody. I mean, I would say if I was president, I'd be like, everybody needs to have a psychedelic experience every 10 years with a tremendous guide. Yes. Would be the stipulation. But you also have to do a lot of work going into that. So where I'm going with this is there are those that are very skilled with the medicine that say, like, hey, if you have a psychological issue or if you have something going on and you're not aware of that and you haven't done the work or you haven't been in the proper space to unfold, I should say, then you go and you start dancing with plant medicine and you open up the floodgates.
Yeah, and you won't
be able to make meaning of everything because you'll be flooded with so much stuff.
And it is the same with some of the somatic experiencing and body work. Like, you have to really ease into that gently for some people, because you can't just do a guided meditation and jump into, your womb and start, processing your trauma from.
I wish we could just jump into the womb.
Yeah.
If everything started like that,
just jump in the womb.
Think how traumatized the world would be.
But like, you can't just like jump into it. There's got to be an acclimation, because everybody's nervous system is so different in how they subjectively experience their own body. Like, you can't just say, oh yeah, do this breath work and jump in. Breath work is a beautiful example of bringing people into deeper layers of their wounding. Like, there's so many modalities out there, but for somebody who is highly, highly traumatized, it can, like, think about holotropic breath work, how powerful that is. It can bring somebody into deep wounding that they're not ready to go into. Just like plant medicine, breath work, some body work. it's really important to go gently, or if you've had a lot of trauma, and recognizing that you've got a dysregulated nervous system, that's a massive indicator that you've got some deep wounding in your body.
So again, to drill in, there's people that don't want to look at it, but the importance of it is like, you're not really going to heal if you don't get into it. So you have to have the courage to be willing to do this work, but you also have to be patient with yourself to go step by step and to go slow into it.
Yes.
Because the layered complexity of the wound can trigger so many different other areas.
And here's what I always say, like, to my clients, that our bodies have a really powerful and unique way of how it wants to unfold in its own wounding process, right? So if we can be really gentle in this surrendering and allowing our body to kind of show us what's there, with the guidance of somebody who can gently guide you through your body. Sometimes when people get this idea of, oh, well, okay, I have wounds, therefore I'm gonna mentally blast through this shit, right? And they're there.
Can you give an example?
Well, somebody who is like doing all the fucking things to heal, right? They're forcing the healing process. Do you see the difference? See, like, there's somebody who's like, they've read all the books, they're doing the breath work, they're doing the meditation, they're doing the yoga, they're doing whatever, all the things, but that comes from outside of themselves, right? They're doing it to fix themselves. There's something wrong with me, I'm going to do all the things, boom, boom, boom. Where my approach, or like not just my approach, but more of the feminine approach, which works so much better for myself and my clients than maybe for women. It's like really slowing down, and you're not fixing anything. You're just sitting with yourself. And I always see when I work with somebody, it's like I see how their body wants to unfold. There's a divine unfolding to their wounding, right? You can't just go in, grab the wound, rip it out, make it go away. There's a layer and an onion, right? Like an onion. There's a layering to that wounding. If you listen to the body has armoring, like we were talking about before.
And Bessel van der Kolk's work, The Body Keeps Score.
Yeah, listening to the body, you've got this layer of a wound, right? And by gently peeling back the first layer of that wound, you're acclimating to getting to the whole. You can't go in there and blast that shit out because you're re-traumatizing. But if you do the first layer, okay, I can breathe through this, my nervous system can handle this, then you're coming at the wound at a later time and listening to the body for the next layer of that wound, and there's a different set of information in it. Makes sense?
No, yes. And I love that you're bringing it up, because I have seen some people that try to...
I used to operate like that, what you're going to say.
Yeah, try to initiate the healing process faster than it needs to be.
Yeah.
And I think, especially as you start studying the psyche and you start studying the ego, what people don't realize is, well, there's these structures, these psychological structures that have been in place for millions of years within us, and especially the ego defense mechanism. You have to go slow with it, because if you go too fast, the ego is going to pick up on it and say, no. That's not me. I'm not weak. I'm not vulnerable. I'm not. It's gonna tell you the story of
kick you out.
Yeah, thinks you are,
or it's protecting you from feeling something deeper.
Totally, right. Totally. So there's these layers there, natural defense mechanisms that will occur within yourself, whether you realize it or not. Because the second you start healing, you are changing the story of who you think you are.
Yes.
You're gaining more perspectives of that diamond, and you're able to see more of your connection with others. As you go into that wound, you see more of your connection to others. And that is the thing that allows you to connect with them, where I've been told that a dark shaman is somebody who closes their wounds and don't allow somebody to connect to them that way. They don't show them their vulnerabilities. And master level healers, like the ones we keep talking about, are showing you their wounds. Like they put it in their book. And you're like, holy shit, the balls on this dude. Like, and he like 3 major wounds, just puts it in the book, and you're like, wow. And he, like, that's how you connect with people.
And it's beautiful how, think about, to get to those like really, really big wounds, it doesn't happen in 6 months. Like these are sometimes like decades of unfolding these really intricate layers of ourselves.
That's my hard part. It's like knowing that this is all.
I know, but that's like everyone's like, when is this healing going to be done? I'm like, it doesn't, or it's not, that doesn't. It doesn't stop because we have so much programming.
Well, we have so much programming, but, you know, like as you incarnate, right, you have your own spiritual trajectory that you've been on, and you've had your own bumps and bruises and stuff like that along the path.
Yeah.
And with everything that we're saying, right, the core essence of who you are is untampered with. You can't.
Yeah.
And also, like, you know, I think later we might tease it out because we talk about a core wound. And if we say that you're untampered with, well, how do you have a core wound? So that's something I want to get into, and I might not have the answer for it. Mm-hmm. So you have your own trajectory spiritually, and then you're incarnating with your own families as well, too.
Yeah.
Now, my masculine programming gets pissed because I want to heal a lot of this stuff faster.
Well, and think about a lot of the programming around, like, everything we do in this culture is fast. Oh, we got to fix it. It's like, how can I capitalize on my healing almost? Like, it's like, how can I see this straight? Like when people start with me, I'm like, your healing doesn't go like a linear path straight up. It is a spiral. It continues and continues, and you get to the next layer where that wound, there's no charge. If the charge isn't there, it's not as charged as the first layer, right? So again, you come back and revisit this wound from a different perspective with more information, and there's less of a charge there, like an activation within the body.
And I would argue that the more circles around that wound you get, the more you orbit it, the more you get to a spot of like where you can start to forgive yourself and you can forgive others. And I'm not saying I'm there yet by any means, but like
none of us are.
Yeah, you start to compassionately be like, oh, this person went through some serious shit if that's the way that they were projecting that out to the world.
Right.
You know, and I feel bad for them being 12 years old and not having somebody to look out for them.
Right.
And so what I can say about doing the work is it doesn't feel like it's always coming along, but I notice the shifts. And I've heard people say that as you heal yourself, you heal the line, you heal your bloodline and your family.
Lineage, yeah.
And I can hear the ego in the statement that I'm doing the work, and I can see it within my family. They're also doing their own work, you know, and every time I interact with them, I notice that the dynamic changes a little bit.
Yeah.
So they're doing cool work on themselves that's facilitating this change that like it's always kind of elevated. It's spiraling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. It's so cool. And I think about, you know, I used to do this all the time on my healing path. I would go to therapy, and I would think to myself, okay, I'm going to do this for 6 months and I'm going to be done. I'm going to be done. I'm going to be healed, and my life is just going to be happy all the fucking time. Giddy up. Sign me up. I am so down for that, right? And I think that is what people think healing is.
Well, so I can speak as an American.
Yeah.
If your company is so good enough to have a mental health package, which it's becoming more of the language, and it's kind of cool that
which
it is.
Which is great.
You know, sometimes they only cover so many, and you're like, oh, you know, well, the first 3 or 4 are on us, and you're like, well, I'm just getting cozy with this person. Like, I'm just...
Yeah. You're like, do you understand that this is a lifelong endeavor?
Yeah. So I'm going to be climbing this mountain for a while.
Yeah.
And it was great because, like, I started seeing a therapist since I moved here.
Yeah.
So I started seeing them recently, and they had this great dialogue with me. They're like, "Hey, what do you want to get out of this? Like, what does this space look like for you?
Right.
What are the tools you're looking to get to work through?" And it's kind of like you and I were talking about. It's like, in some areas I can see the blockage. I said, like, I'm looking for you to tell me, like, the shit that I can't see, but also, like, here's the stuff that I do see where I'm getting blocked in my own life, where the energy isn't flowing the way that I think it should be, and giving me the tools and the perspectives to work through that.
Yeah, I think that's where a good healer or a good guide comes into play, because we can't see ourselves. And it's those questions. And again, they're not doing it for you. It's usually in that collaborative setting where they're guiding you back to these elements of parts of yourself that you can't see.
Mm-hmm.
And so that you can see a part of that spiral and be like, oh, it's been me the whole time. Damn it. So
the spiritual joke of it all.
Yeah. It's been me this whole time. I've ruined my life.
I had a fucking crazy journey where it was something like that, where I was with the medicine and I was chasing this thing and it had a mask on or something. Just came to me out of nowhere. So I was chasing this thing. And through the entire journey, throughout the night, I was like still chasing it, and I'd go and I'd talk to somebody over here and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then I'd go internal and I'm still chasing this thing. And eventually, like, I take the mask off and it's me. And I was like,
it's like,
that's the way that it is.
It is like that. Yeah. I had a experience like that in a journey that I did. And it was the same thing. It was like all the pain and loneliness that I was feeling over the pandemic. It's like, oh, I'm such a victim. And then on my journey, it was like, oh, I've actually been reinitiating that over and over again through my own actions. It's like, oh, so it happened to me, but then I kept doing it. I was like choosing to be in the victimhood of it.
Yeah.
Right. So it's really powerful when you can get into seeing those different angles of the wound. Because sometimes we think we're the victim of something and we're like, oh shit, I've been doing that.
I had somebody, I was with Chris, who we interviewed, and I'm talking to Chris about something, and Chris like, so fucking wise and wizardly, and it's like, why do you think you keep going back to that story? And it's like, because some part of me likes being the whiny victim of it, knowing that somebody fucked me over on this, and I'm helpless and need help. And he's like, all right, just as long as you recognize that too.
Yeah. You're like, got it. Thank you for showing that, like mirroring that back to me.
Amazing mirror. You know? So we were talking about top down and then bottom up. And in the center, you have the heart.
Yes.
Where does the heart come into this with wounds?
Well, so for me, I think it's the compassionate stance with self. Right?
Elaborate, please.
So when we're entering our wounds, we're entering into really deep spaces of maybe shame or whatever the wound is, whatever the core wound, whether it's like shame, embarrassment. These sometimes when we experience a trauma, we get kicked out of our body, right? And the
body's no longer safe for us to be in.
Yeah. So we get kicked out, we fragment, and then we literally don't remember it, right? So in order to go into those really sometimes shameful experiences, we have to have a lot of self-compassion. And this is where we have to like kind of love ourselves through all the cringiness and all the ickiness within us. Because normally if we just saw ourselves in this really kind of downtrodden situation of feeling so much despair and shame, that's a really scary place to go to.
Very much so.
Very much.
And especially like if you're not on the victim side of it, you're the person doing something. That's a hard space. Like in my own experience, knowing the way that I've shown up before, it's hard for me to be compassionate with myself.
If you've been like a perpetrator or something. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I was asking a friend, Mariana, about it once, and she said, was like, well, how do we have that compassion for ourselves? And she's like, well, like, just think of like a small child and the love and the compassion that you give them as they're going through their ups and their downs and their temper tantrums.
Yeah.
God, I wish I was at this point fully.
Yeah.
As I was venting to Natalie about a 3.5-year-old tornado. So, but just meeting yourself like you would meet that child of like, hey, and I'm here, you know, and it's not a matter of like condoning or condemning it. It's just.
Yeah. And I work with like parts work too in one of my programs. And it's a big part of the process is like we have to tend to our nervous system, really understand what that is. But then we have to tend to the parts of ourselves. And there's all these different parts within ourselves, like that there's so much tension, right? There's so much tension within ourselves that we feel that these parts of ourselves are in conflict. So it's like, how can we tend lovingly to all these parts of ourselves that are literally on polar opposites? Like one is a victim, one is like
destroyer of worlds.
Yeah, destroyer of the world. Like we have so much on the back end of who we are, and compassionately holding and tending to those parts is something that is really like it's like a flip the switch kind of like situation when clients are like, oh, I have to love those parts. And when they love it, they're like, we do mirror work. And when they do this, they see these like parts of themselves that have been so hidden and like forgotten about. And they come at them with love and actually give them acknowledgement and love. And there's just like such an emotional release because they're seeing all these pieces of how they're like the back end of them is navigating like the wounds, right?
Well, and I think so to get to a spot of love can be hard. So like we're talking about layering, and
it's very uncomfortable.
And exercise I do sometimes, like if I had a hand to draw the comic strip, I would. I think sometimes I look at it as like I'm inviting this new aspect of myself to a party.
Yeah. Oh yeah, shadow party.
So kind of a shadow party.
Yeah.
But like, there's elements of that. And if I was drawing this out in a comic strip, I have this ability that like I can pull myself out of something to understand that there's like humor in it. So every time this thing shows up, and unfortunately, the more along the path I get, the more shadow elements I get introduced to.
Yeah.
And I just go, okay, that's one more part of me that I have to introduce to the party. So mentally, like I see this comic strip of like all these different versions of myself, and there's the one who wants to save the world, and there's the one who wants to masturbate, and there's the one who wants to do this and that, right?
Yeah.
And I have to let all these fuckers come into the party.
Yeah.
And that's my job, is to just say like, I'm not telling anybody that they're bad or good.
Yeah.
Like I'm just looking this out on the comic panel strip.
Yeah.
So before I can get to that love, it helps me to accept and let that person into the party.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can start to love it because I can find the humor in how it's interacting with the other things.
Right.
That works for me.
And what you're doing is you're kind of doing parts work. And parts work is it's called like interfamily systems where you're
synchronicity of the universe.
Yeah.
Okay.
And like I studied parts
it's been
work.
coming up in other areas of my life.
Yeah, but it's interesting when I studied parts work, I was like, oh man, I've already been doing this, like just tending to these like parts of ourselves that are in conflict.
I feel relief that I don't have another fucking thing to do.
You've been doing it.
Oh, like fucking check that out.
Check that one. Just like you're like, I'm doing it. Great. That's funny. So coming back to the heart, like I always say tending to the parts of us. It's really important that's where the heart comes in. It's like acknowledging, being compassionate, understanding, empathizing with all these different roles within you that are trying to drive the bus, right? And then another aspect of our wounding and coming into our heart, which is really important, is being in recognition that somebody else has wounds, right? And being able to empathize with their situation. Like we've all done this. We're all master unconscious projectors in certain situations. And when you start to get into your own work and start to really tend to those parts, you actually have more compassion for people who are in their own wounding unconsciously. And you can recognize it and you can soften versus being agitated or triggered by it.
Yeah, coming at them like guns blazing.
Well, just reacting. Instead, you're just like, wow, they're like dysregulated right now. They're having a very intense internal experience to something, and then they're coming at you. That's where, coming from the heart, you can actually just like, you don't have to be triggered by it. As soon as you start softening to your own parts, you will soften naturally to other people's wounds.
And what's coming up to me is the newer dialogues around child rearing of like,
yeah,
this is exactly what you're talking about. And maybe for me, this stuff is so triggering because I'm trying to practice it. I'm fully integrated in myself.
Yeah.
Of being able to meet myself and then being like, hey, I see that you're dysregulated.
Yeah.
And I love the terms of like calling it like a pattern of like, this is the defense pattern your systems go into for survival.
Absolutely.
So there's gifts within that pattern.
Mm-hmm.
It's not all like bad things. It's kept you alive to this point. But the gifts within the pattern, but also that it is just a pattern. So I had a friend that I had a very hard talk with them. I didn't say like, you're a fucking asshole and blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. I was like, I'm noticing a pattern. Here's the way that I see that pattern, and here's the way that I might see that unfolding for you if you were to continue to go down that road.
Right.
So it just like when somebody, like if you're talking about somebody and you say like the Brene Brown thing of the story I'm telling myself is, as opposed to, Natalie, you're a da-da-da-da-da-da.
Right. You're saying like, hey, I'm perceiving something. Let me know. Like you're just, this is my perception. This is something that's left, right. And everything is perceptual, right? So it's, so yeah, coming back to the heart, like when, like the top down and bottom up, if we can meet those, it's always going to meet in the heart. Always, always, always. And when we apply both of those approaches to our wounding, it's like, I don't know, it's just it's like a ricocheting out there. Like it'll just be so much softer with people.
It's a ripple. It's a wonderful ripple.
But I think that's the word I was looking for. Ricochet.
Ricochet is very harsh.
That's true. Ricochet, the heart ricochets.
I'm thinking of like a fucking sniper rifle when you say ricochet. And I'm like, oh, it's like, like a sniper rifle from your heart. I'm like, no, it's more like a ripple.
Okay, maybe it was the wrong choice of words.
For me, I was triggered.
No, after I said that, I was like, that was not a good choice of words. Anyway, it ripples out. It's just that like consciousness continuation, right? It's like, we're not just like thinking about things. We're not just unconsciously reacting from our body. We're bringing the two to the center. So
can you think of any homework that you would do to bring people more into their heart space to meet themselves compassionately? Maybe, because I think we've given people great instruction on how to find a teacher to hold a space.
Yeah, in episode number 2, how to find a good guide or teacher. If you are looking for somebody, we have a full podcast on how to find one that is going to bring you back to you.
So I'm guessing, like with the homework I'm asking here, is this?
I would,
because we need to factor in the safetyness of it too.
Yeah, I think sitting quietly with yourself, and I think tending to a part of yourself, just knowing that there's different parts of you within your wounding that are acting out, right? You want to think of yourself as this, like Alex, you're sitting right here, right now, consciously focusing on doing this podcast, but there's a lot of parts of you that are hidden on the back end, right? And they're driving the ship. They're driving the ship unconsciously based on the wounding in your body, right?
That summarizes APCT really well.
Right? So it's like they're driving the ship. So it's like a really safe and soft way to start is just asking yourself, is there a part of me that is acting out of accordance, right? Like, or acting
out of accordance to what?
Out of alignment, I guess. What part of me is trying to get my attention through a wound? And if you can identify that there is a part of you that is, maybe there's a part of you that's sabotaging things. Sabotaging is I got a lot of sabotagers in the back end, right? I got a lot of those little bitches on the back end.
Yeah, they could start a club together.
Yeah, I got a sabotage club in the back end. So
they'll make sure nothing gets done.
Yeah, they procrastinate, they do all sorts of shit. So and think about, like, you got this core wound, and then you've got all these parts of yourselves that are sabotaging your conscious decisions right now because they're protecting you. So essentially. So a really good way is to sit with that version of you and close your eyes and just visualize the sabotage version of you, the one that's trying to manage everything, the one that's trying to protect you. First of all, just sit with yourself and identify what part of you is on the back end that's stopping you from doing certain things that you want to do. And just starting the dialogue. And this may feel really weird for some people. It's like, who am I talking to? You're talking to yourself, essentially, like all these back end parts. But having a conversation and just empathetically listening and not judging that part of yourself. And
eventually you're bringing it home.
Well, yeah,
you're integrating.
You're taking that part that's hidden, and you're bringing consciousness and light to it.
And you were talking about fractalizing. You're adding another dimension of yourself.
Yeah, you're bringing another part of yourself that's hidden and fragmented back into the wholeness of who you are, and that's the wholeness of who you are is really the full expression of you. So when we can get all those people on the back end, like bringing them in for the party, but starting with one, pay attention very much to your body. You may have an emotional release. You may have just massive insight just from one little conversation.
Yeah. So give yourself the space to be.
Yeah. It could take 5 minutes. 5-minute conversation. If it keeps going, let it go. If it becomes too much, and that's when you really want to do some deep breathing and just take a step back and get out.
Well, I've heard some people say that when you're doing something like this, you should almost have a timer on it.
Yeah, initially climatizing. Climatizing to it, but it's fascinating. It's kind of like Gestalt therapy with a partner. It's like interfamily systems and Gestalt kind of mashed together, and you're just having this conversation with yourself and kind of picture that drama stage. For me, that's how I visualize it. It's like that part of myself is in the chair.
Tell people what Gestalt is before you.
Gestalt is when you're having an interview process with yourself.
With yourself, or you can get to advanced levels where you're doing it with somebody you have unfinished trauma with.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, initially, let's start with this.
Yeah. So that's a good start. We won't go into any more, but that's a really powerful little exercise. And if you do that for 5 minutes a day, you're actually getting to know these little hidden parts of yourself, and you're gonna again get so much more perspective on your multidimensionality.
And I would also say, too, that as you learn to communicate and dialogue and better understand, you're also opening yourself up to newer levels of energy. So the one side of that negative energy is you weren't consciously aware of it, and it was just kind of coming out in all these different ways, ricocheting out,
rippling out.
But now you are understanding of it, and it's kind of like a really good manager. A really good manager, doesn't matter the person, they know how to get something out of that person to be productive for the overall mission.
Yeah.
Right. So you're going to have access to a new level of energy.
Yeah.
Hopefully healthy.
Well, and you got to think these parts of yourselves are literally the blockages protecting the wound. When you start to allow these parts to be seen, to be held, to be acknowledged, to be heard, it's they step down from that role. I mean, it takes a little while of continuation, but eventually they step down from that role, and then your whole energy field starts to shift and change.
mean, I love what we're covering. I love that we talked about the gradualness of it, that you need to slowly work into it.
Yeah.
Having to have the safety to do it, the layers of it, the way that it's interconnected to all these other things.
Mm-hmm.
This was super fun for me. I hope everybody has fun listening to the podcast as well as recording it.
Yeah, I know. This is our first live in person, so definitely a different dynamic.
Yeah, closed audience. It's a live recording to a closed audience.
Yeah. But thank you for listening. And any questions, follow us on the Instagram page. We'd love to have you engage, follow along, ask questions. We're amped and open to hear from you.
We're really trying to start kind of a community here where we're helping each other heal and navigate this weird space that we find ourselves in the world. So share when it resonates for you. We love doing this. Hope you love listening to it. Like and follow it. Comment.
Okay, thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Huffing Spirit Podcast. Remember, you are your own teacher. Take what resonates and leave the rest. For more info, follow us on Instagram at Huffing Spirit Podcast and subscribe on Spotify or iTunes. Bye for now.